against the Soviet Union. Your Honors, in accordance with the provisions relating to the responsibility of the members of a conspiratorial organization, provisions common to all systems of law of civilized nations, all the members of the conspiratorial clique should bear the responsibility for aggression against the USSR. I'm not going to deal now with the question whether all the members of that clique are among the accused. One thing is clear. All the accused in the dock bear the responsibility for aggression against the USSR. Addressing this tribunal on behalf of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, I consider all the charges brought against the accused proved with regard to aggression against the USSR, as well as on other counts of the indictment. The prosecution considers the guilt of all the accused proved in the preparation and initiation of aggressive wars, conspiracy against peace, violation of laws and customs of war, the heaviest crimes against mankind. The part played by each accused in the conspiracy is different, but each of them taken separately as a participant of the criminal conspiracy cannot but bear the responsibility for all the crimes committed by the whole conspiratorial clique. The analysis of the specific guilt of each accused in accordance with Section 8, Appendix A of the indictment, aggression against the Soviet Union, will be given by the prosecution when appraising the personal responsibility of the accused. Now, I invite the attention of the tribunal to the fact that the following defendants played an especially important part in the preparation and realization of aggression against the USSR and should bear for this the heaviest responsibility. Tojo Hideki. Tojo must, in fairness, be called the leader of the Japanese militarist clique and most prominent in conducting its aggressive policy toward the USSR. In his capacity as chief of the Kwantung Army Gendarmerie, Tojo actively participated in subversive and sabotage activities directed against the Soviet Union. While chief of staff of the Kwantung Army, Tojo did his best to create a military base in Manchuria and to prepare a war of aggression against the USSR and the Mongolian People's Republic. He drafted strategic plans for an attack against the Soviet Union and did his best to obtain their approval in Tokyo. As Vice War Minister, Tojo, together with Itagaki, should bear the responsibility for an attack against the Mongolian People's Republic and the Soviet Union in the Halhingol River area. While holding the post of Minister and later Prime Minister of Japan from July 1940, Tojo drew Japan into the Second World War. His active role in the conclusion of the Tripartite Pact and the military political alliance with Hitlerite Germany and Fascist Italy is well known and does not require any special evidence. In that period, Tojo persistently conducted an aggressive policy against the USSR. It was he who on July 2, 1941, participated in reaching the insidious decision of the Imperial Conference concerning the secret preparation for a war against the USSR under the guise of a neutrality pact. Tojo should bear full responsibility for carrying out that decision in creating and implementing the notorious Kantokuan Plan, as a result of which the whole of Manchuria was flooded with Japanese troops awaiting only the last command in order to rush at the Soviet Far East. Not for a minute, in the course of 1941-1943, did Tojo give up his idea of Japan seizing the Soviet territory up to Lake Baikal and did all he could to prepare and carry out that criminal plan. Yumezu Yoshijiro. General Yumezu was the most prominent representative of the most reactionary part of the Japanese military proponents of a close military aggressive alliance of Japan with Germany and Italy, and during a long period directly supervised the planning and preparation of a war of aggression against the Soviet Union. As far back as 1932, Yumezu, holding a position of authority in the Japanese General Staff, participated in the preparation of a war against the USSR, which was planned for 1934. The part Yumezu played in the military preparations of Japan against the Soviet Union became much greater when he became vice minister in 1936. He was especially active in the conclusion of the so-called Anti-Comintern Pact. Together with Tojo, Yumezu played an outstanding role in the creation of the Manchurian military base and the preparation of the Kwantung Army for an attack against the Soviet Union. Being commanding general of the Kwantung Army, Yumezu from 1939 to 1943 directly supervised the drafting of offensive plans and other military preparations for a war of aggression against the USSR. It was Yumezu who planned the capture of Vladivostok, Khabarovsk, Blagoveshchensk, and a number of other towns and cities of the Soviet Maritime Province. He also supervised the drafting of the plan of activities directed against the USSR and of administrative measures on the Soviet territory which the Kwantung Army planned to seize. Yumezu, together with Toji and Sugiyama, was the author of the Kentoku-an plan, a plan for the invasion of Soviet territory by the Kwantung Army. In the last period of his activities as chief of the Japanese General Staff, Yumezu continued to carry on preparations for a war against the Soviet Union and rendered considerable assistance to Hitlerite Germany. Araki Sadao. Araki was the exponent of the extreme expansionist circles of the Japanese military in the whole course of his political career. During the period of the Japanese intervention between 1918 and 1922, he took an active part in the seizure of the Soviet Far East, and in the following years, when he occupied positions of responsibility in the Japanese government, was preparing a war of aggression against the USSR. In 1933, at the Conference of Governors, Araki urged that territories of the Primoria, Baikal, and Siberia should be seized by way of military occupation. In 1938, Araki planned the occupation of the Mongolian People's Republic. In August 1941, when the attack against the Soviet Union was for the Japanese imperialists only a question of time, Araki demanded that the attack against the USSR should be speeded up so as to complete what Japan had not succeeded in carrying out during the period of the intervention between 1918 and 1922. Araki devoted his whole life to the implementation of his criminal plans of the Japanese military clique. He was a military man, a diplomat, a secret service agent, chief of the General Staff College, and chief of the political police, gendarmerie, war minister, and education minister. In any of those roles, he was first and foremost an active conspirator against peace, a champion of aggression, an advocate of violence and war, directed first of all against the USSR. Itagaki Seishiro. The name of General Itagaki is closely connected with all the acts of Japanese aggression against the USSR. Itagaki, together with Hiranuma and Daraki, was one of the prominent leaders of the young officers, an adherent of an outspoken policy of occupation and terrorism, who would not keep clear of provoking any incidents or murdering his political opponents. As soon as Itagaki assumed the post of the Kwantung Army Chief of Staff, he started drawing up plans of an attack against the Mongolian People's Republic and the Soviet Union with a view of capturing her far eastern areas and creating the Greater Japan extending up to Baikal. As War Minister, Itagaki was the instigator of undeclared aggressive wars against the USSR in the Lake Hassan area and in the area of the Halkingol River, and an ardent supporter of a military and political alliance between Japan, Hitlerite Germany, and Fascist Italy, which in the first place was directed against the USSR. Hiranuma Kiichiro. Regardless of the public or government office which Hiranuma held at one time or another, whether he was the leader of the reactionary society Kokuhonsha, or vice president and later president of the Privy Council, prime minister or home minister, Hiranuma had always been most closely connected with the military circles of Japan, whose aggressive designs he supported and fomented. The entire career of this defendant was devoted to pursuing an aggressive policy vis-à-vis the Soviet Union and to forming a military bloc of aggressive nations against the USSR. In 1931, Hiranuma carried on a campaign for the severance of diplomatic relations with the Soviet Union. While president of the Privy Council, Hiranuma approved the conclusion of the Anti-Comintern Pact directed against the USSR. He played an active part in the undeclared aggressive wars against the USSR and the Mongolian People's Republic in 1938 and 1939. He participated in the conference of July 2, 1941, at which the decision of a secret preparation for a war against the Soviet Union was reached. While in command of the Japanese army in Korea, and later as war minister and commander-in-chief of the Kwantung Army, Minami took an active part in the seizure of Manchuria and in the establishment of a military base for an attack against the USSR. When Minami was a member of the Privy Council and president of the Political Association of Greater Japan, he played an important part in implementing the plans of the conspirators for the creation of the so-called Greater East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere, in an attempt to transform the Soviet Far East and Siberia into a Japanese colony. From the beginning to the end of Minami's military and political career, he remained an organizer of aggression against the peoples of the Soviet Union and other peace-loving nations. Shigemitsu Mamoru. Shigemitsu, former Japanese ambassador to Moscow and Minister of Foreign Affairs of Japan, was very active in carrying out the aggressive foreign policy of the militarist clique.